Welcome, Tracy, and thank you so much for joining me today to answer some questions about your teaching practice. I understand that you are an experienced primary school teacher, and I look forward to gaining the knowledge from a proficient educator like yourself. Teaching has progressed immensely over the last decade compared to when you became an educator. How has your philosophy of teaching changed, or has it remained similar to when you first started?
Hello, Holly. Well, it's very similar to when I first started. It's just really the way that I'm teaching that has changed. I still think it's really important that we empower students to be critical thinkers, creative, and prepare them for an ever-changing world that they're going to go into to work and live. But my actual philosophy is still very, very, very similar.
Over the years you have been teaching, there must have been some challenges with technological advancements and social and cultural growth. What teaching strategies do you use to adapt your lessons to keep students engaged?
I use a lot of technology, different platforms. A lot of the lessons that I teach, I set up Google Classrooms. I have Google Sites with all the learning activities, websites. I encourage collaborative learning. We do a lot of group work, some independent work, but I think it's really important to use technology whenever we can, and for students to have different ways that they can show that they're learning, and to make it real. Project-based learning is really important, so it empowers them with the skills that they're going to need when they enter the workforce.
Yeah. Do you ever have issues with the technology side of things?
Initially, it was really frightening. When we first went to iPads, I spent the holidays beforehand trying to learn the iPad, and I very quickly learned that if I walk into a lesson and I know more about an app than they do, that will only be the case for 5 or 10.
In education today, we aim for an inclusive learning environment. How do you incorporate differentiated teaching and learning opportunities into your classroom, and do you face any challenges when doing this?
Firstly, there's always challenges, but I believe very, very strongly in inclusive education, especially in the fact that I have a son that had special needs and he had a full inclusive education. So it's all about adapting the lessons, looking at the outcome and how a student with different learning needs is going to meet that outcome. So technology is a really important platform. Some students may have difficulty reading, so we can use audio. Some students have difficulty writing, so they can use the iPad to do, or a laptop to complete scaffold. So I do a lot of scaffolding that any child in the class can use, but I'm looking at a different level for a child that may need it very well different.
When planning for lessons or units, how do you ensure the general capabilities and cross-curricular priorities are met?
It's really important to be able to go to a syllabus document and understand the outcomes for each of the subjects, all the key learning areas, and then being able to study that and then adapt your lessons suitably so that it meets the needs for all the students that you have in your class.
Yeah, it's something I'm learning to do, is really focusing on what's in the syllabus to adapt my lessons.
Yeah, and the more you read it, the easier it is to follow and understand. There's a lot of information out there, and when you first read a syllabus document, it can be quite confronting. You think, what does that mean? But it's just a matter of looking at the words, breaking it down, and looking at other examples, unit plans that NESA put out, and then working out how you can best use those to suit the students that are in your class.
Data and analysis is a huge part of making informed decisions for planning and teaching. When using collected student data, how do you make suitable adjustments to your teaching practice?
So one of the things that we do before we start a unit is to do a pre-test so that we can see what students already know. There's no point in going over things that they know or that they've already learned about. So working out where you should start in a unit, getting that information, what do students already know, and then building on that. Again, looking at different ways that you can use that data to best engage the students.
Moving on from data collection, what tools and practices do you use for assessment?
We use formative assessment, where we're just going through and doing little things along the way to assess the student's understanding. Then we've got summative assessment, which are assessments that are more likely written, that will assess what the students actually know. A lot of observation on the way through, peer-to-peer testing, and in English peer editing, where students will, before they hand a piece of writing in, they will have what we call a breakdown buddy, and the buddy will read their work, offer feedback, what's something that's really good, something that needs improvement. And they'll look at spelling and things like that. So then the students have another point of view before they then hand that in to us.
I really like that breakdown buddy.
Yeah, breakdown buddies is really good.
How do you provide feedback to your students, and do you find the students are receptive to this kind of feedback?
I think the most effective feedback is one-to-one. I can't see the point of writing lots of things on work because students don't read it.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of time, but I always find time to do the one-on-one, especially in English. After I have marked an English piece of writing, I'll sit down and I will have already marked out the glows. We talk about glows and grows, and the grows are where they could improve, and they should then be goals for the next piece of writing.
As outlined in the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers, making consistent and comparable judgments is essential. How do you engage in moderation practices when evaluating students' quality of work?
When I'm marking something alone, I actually go through it a number of times. I recently did an English task, and I began marking a few things, and my marks were low. So I spoke to a colleague, and oh no, and she pointed out where I'd been really hard. And then I spent a little bit more time. I'd mark them all, and by the end of it, I always mark with a rubric. And at the end of it, I felt that I needed to go back through a number of them to make sure I was consistent with my marks. We then take our English, I suppose, is the focus with this one, because this is where you can be a little bit subjective. And then we moderate it amongst our year group, where we put A's, B's, C's and D's in piles, and then talked amongst ourselves about why this was an A and why this really good B didn't quite make it to an A.
Yeah.
And I find that that's really, really important, because you need to then see how your students are comparing against students in other classes and how other teachers are marking as well, because it takes quite a while to be able to find that spot where you're actually spot on with marking against the rubric.
Yeah, I can see how that's really important actually, keeping that consistent marking.
Yeah.
It must be rewarding watching your students grow throughout the year. How do you assess and reflect on the impacts you have on your students' learning in regards to your teaching practice?
It is extremely rewarding. You know when you've done a good job, when you can see happy students, students that want to come to school, want to come to class, and students that are striving to do their very best. And that's when you know you've done a good job, when they're asking you, how can I do this better? What can I do better? And they're listening to what you say, and then they come back with a piece of work, and you can see exactly where they've improved, and it's been from things that you've actually told them. And I see that in my writing tasks in particular, because we put goals for the next one, and I have got that in front of when they're writing, they're looking at the last goal that was set, and that is on the table for them to remember while they're writing. And then I can see that when I hand them in, and it's like, wow, all of those two things. I usually will only put 2 goals so that it's achievable.
It seems these days that parents want to be involved in their children's learning more than ever. What strategies and tools do you use to keep parents connected and informed with student progress?
The thing about parents being involved, the parents I'm finding, not so much in helping them with their work, but parents are more involved, but they are putting a lot more responsibility on the school. I always try, and when I talk to parents, I talk about the partnership between home and school, and there's a number of things that need to be supported at home. Basic things like tables, getting students getting their children into the routine of doing homework for when they leave the primary school and they're going into high school. The demands that are on them, they need to be in a good routine, knowing how to manage their time, so that they can get through those things. Children are really busy these days. They have activities after school. It's very hard to fit homework in.
Yep.
We usually have a fortnightly homework period, so that students also have the time that they can do it over the weekends. We have lots of additional things if parents do want their children to do extra. We have different maths activities. All of their key learning areas. We have Google sites that have access to different maths, English, those sorts of sites, so that they can do extra work.
Well, that concludes our interview today. Thank you again, Tracy, for sharing your insight, tips and tricks of the teaching cycle. I look forward to being able to implement some of these strategies into my own practice in the near future.
It's my pleasure. You make a beautiful teacher.